Well, let's get it started out in our first tier. The Panzer III, the Matilda, and the M3 Lee. For this whole setup, we tried to do one American, one British, and one German tank per bracket. And then we're going to have a nice little versus match at the end. So, Reagan, why don't you go ahead and start us off? Fuck, marry, kill. What are we doing here?
For this one, I'm going to have to go with, I think you got to go with the Panzer III for Mary. You get a perfect blend of decent armor protection, especially for the variants in this theater. A solid gun, not the best by any means, but capable all around. And it's aesthetically pleasing. Now, the harder part's going to be with the Lee and the Matilda, because I want to say fuck the Matilda. And kill the Lee, but I'm not sure if it's just because I think the Lee is one of the ugliest tanks in existence. It's just so odd, honestly. There's just so many different things going on with this. I'm going to stick with my original one. I'm going to say marry the Panzer III, fuck the Matilda, and you got to kill the Lee. I'm sticking with it.
An interesting lineup. Dan, what are your thoughts?
The Panzer III doesn't have auto traverse. Okay, so I'm fucking murdering the Panzer III. And then I'm going to absolutely fuck the Matilda because I like that it has those cool side skirts. And that's it. That's my only reasoning. And then the M3 Lee I got to marry because it's the tank of many talents. Look how many different guns it has. Need a gun for fucking? You got your 37 millimeter. You need a gun for fucking harder. You got your 75 millimeter. What can it do? Any situation it can handle.
It is absolutely bristling with guns.
So I'm definitely going to marry it.
Yeah, I definitely think it adds to the charm. For me, I got to marry the Matilda. I love the Matilda. It's got 75 millimeters of frontal armor, which makes it almost impenetrable for anything in this theater. Side skirts are incredibly attractive, not to mention it has that cool North African tricolor color scheme. Thing looks rad.
That's the gray, tan, and like brown, reddish brown, right?
Yeah.
Which didn't the British Tank Museum say it's blue actually?
I think it was it's like the Imperial War Museum that they were like, it's this light blue, and everyone's like, well, the Imperial War Museum can't be wrong.
I think we all saw that one coming.
For fucking, I got to give it to the M3 Lee. It's got the 37 millimeter turret mounted gun, a 75 millimeter sponson mounted gun. The driver has his two own fixed 30 caliber machine guns, which is an absolutely ludicrous idea. I don't know why anyone would ever have that. But you gotta imagine the inside of that thing. You could have a Roman orgy in there. Anyway, for the Panzer III, I think I'm gonna have to kill. It just has this Africa core air of superiority about it that I find really unbecoming.
You know what? I gotta agree with that at the end. It's definitely got that smug vibe. He thinks he's better than everyone. I think that's clear. He's just got that attitude. Now, somewhat deserved, in my humble opinion, but I understand it. One thing I have to go back to though, real quick on the Lee, is while it does have a absurd, just conglomerate even of various weapons, it can be penetrated frontally with ease by the Panzer III.
That's true.
That's just more holes that I can put guns out of.
That's true. That is the American way of thinking.
That is the American spirit. So, I can't help but agree with that. One thing we got to keep in mind is at this period, we also have some of the tanks we're going to be talking about later with a little bit more gusto, let's say, than the 5 centimeter on the Panzer. And that might shake things up as we go forward.
So that actually brings us perfectly into our second tier, which consists of the Panzer IV with its 7.5 centimeter main gun, the Sherman with its 75 millimeter main gun, and then representing the British, somewhat unfairly in this lineup, I feel, is the Crusader.
I think the Crusader's a fucking hideous tank, and so I'm gonna kill it. It's a stupid little squatty piece of shit, and I think it should be obliterated. No other reasoning beyond just looks. And then the Sherman is a mainstay, and I love it. It looks great. It's one of the Hampson's tank. And you have a pretty solid main gun. Plus, you have auto traverse. So yeah, it's getting married.
Not only auto traverse, but a very fast auto traverse.
Yes. Now I'm gonna marry the Sherman, but the Panzer IV looks fucking awesome. So I'm gonna fuck it. I'm gonna fuck it a lot. And that's it. That's all I got. I'm providing the retard perspective, hard R, and I'm saying fuck the Panzer, marry the Sherman, and just I would curb stomp the Crusader if I could.
Interesting.
Ugly little bitch.
Very fiery, very passionate. I love the spirit. Let's see what our main correspondent Reagan has to say on this topic.
I'm gonna have to go with Dan on the Crusader. There's some positives to this tank, but at the end of the day, I hate this tank. I hate it. One, because if you look at the way the armor is laid out, it looks like if they'd have just put any effort at all into giving it a little bit of armor thickness, you have angles all over this. This could have actually been a solid tank with just any amount of decent armor, but there's just none to be found. Every inch of this tank is just begging you, just fucking kill me. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm killing the Crusader. There's no question. Now this is where it gets interesting though, between the Sherman and the Panzer IV, because the Panzer IV is your tried and true, reliable in every sense. You know exactly what you're gonna get. There's no surprises. But on the other hand, at this point, we're talking about the Panzer IV up to the G variant in the North African theater, and it's just a phenomenal tank overall. It's just the better tank out of the three. I don't think that's really up for debate. It's got better armor, a better gun, great turret traverse, reliable as far as German tanks go. I mean, there's really nothing you can hate about this tank. I'm going to have to say you marry the Panzer IV, you fuck the Sherman. Just that's what I'm coming down on.
Interesting. That is very interesting. Well, I will say, I do believe we all have our biases. Reagan, I believe you're slightly more biased towards German tanks.
That's fair to say. I'm trying to be objective, but
Well, I do love the Panzer IV. The Panzer IV is my favorite German tank because I feel like it just has that workhorse of the Wehrmacht mentality of just being a solid tank. And it's 7.5 millimeter gun, very high velocity, very nice. I will say the Sherman's has better frontal protection with that angled armor. And its 75 millimeter gun is more than capable of not only fighting tanks, but of the main job of a tank, fighting infantry with HE rounds, which I think the Sherman excels at. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say fuck the Panzer IV because it is a handsome little workhorse of a tank. But I'm marrying the Sherman. I'm coming home to the Sherman. I want to grow old with the Sherman. And it's 68 different variants. I don't feel like the Crusader is the best tank. I feel like it is a bit unfairly matched. But I think it's a handsome little tank. Can you imagine if you... Not a German, because if you're a German, I don't think there's really any reason to fear the Crusader. But if you're an Italian, and you see one of these Crusaders flying at you with its 27-mile-an-hour top speed, and it's pretty hard punching for its weight class, 40 millimeter main gun, I think there's definitely something to be afraid of in the Crusader. I will say that it is lacking, and they really kind of stuck their toe halfway in the water as far as angling armor on the turret, and then they got to the body, and they're like, should we do anything here? And they're like, nah, it's fine.
Well, to interject, I mean, you're talking about the British and the Italians, which is basically putting Floyd Mayweather in a kindergarten against a child.
Yeah.
And just telling him to go ham.
Which is what makes it funny.
Yeah. But yes, I agree. The Crusaders the weakest of the three. But we can all agree that Italians are the weakest of any country ever.
Yeah. That's really the main point we're trying to get across is no matter how bad you are in life, you'll never be as bad as an Italian.
Yeah, I've got he's spot on with that. I mean, when you're talking about Italy faring in armored warfare at this period versus anyone, I mean, if you have any tank with any redeeming quality, you're already a mile ahead of the Italians at this point. This is a comparison where this kid, you've got a kid at school, he's bullying someone, all right, and then the dude's dad shows up. Turns out you've been bullying Mike Tyson's kid. And now he's just beating you to death in the bathroom. That's Italy in every armored engagement.
Yeah. I think it is. Which is going to bring us into our third and final tier. We have set up the Panzer II, the M3 Stuart, and the British Valentine.
Now, this is much more competitive. I'm excited for this one. Ooh, boy. This might be our most fair matchup so far. On this one, I'm going to have to say you marry the Valentine. And I have no particular fondness for British armor generally, but out of the three, I think you'd have to be on crack. You'd have to be on a lot of crack to not give it to the Valentine on this one. I'm going to have to then say you fuck the Stuart. You've got plenty of different firepower options. You've got a light tank, served great as a scout, and it still has the ability to support infantry, which is great. The Panzer II early war, fair enough tank. Good infantry support with the 2-centimeter cannon. But if we're talking armor versus armor here, for most of the things we're seeing in North Africa, the Panzer II, for anything other than just light infantry support and scouting, is just garbage. I'm going to say you kill the Panzer II on this one. Fuck the Stuart, and you're marrying the Valentine.
I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to say kill the Panzer II, obviously. I mean, I think the Panzer II is very nice. It's a very humble little tank. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be good for infantry support and not a whole lot else. On the other hand, I'm going to marry the Stuart. I think the Stuart is, not only is it a good looking tank, but it's a fast tank. 36 miles an hour top speed on this thing, which is absolutely flying. Its radial engine is a bit fuel inefficient, so when the Allies were actually chasing the retreating Axis powers across, they actually couldn't catch them because they had to stop and fuel up their Stuarts so many times. But I think that's, no factor here. The Valentine, I do like the Valentine. It's got that 40 millimeter main gun, which makes it pretty lethal to most things in this theater of combat. It's got decent armor for an infantry tank, but the main problem with the Valentine is that this thing could not do 15 miles an hour falling out of the fucking sky. I cannot imagine anything worse in this world than being stuck inside of a small British armored vehicle traveling across the Sahara Desert at no more than 14 miles an hour. I have not been to hell, but if I were to imagine what it would be like, that would be it. Pre-air conditioning in an armored vehicle in Sahara traveling as slowly as humanly possible.
Make that even worse is they're watching the movie Sahara with Matthew McConaughey.
That is a
then
hot
they would
take.
really be in hell. That movie stinks.
I just want you to know I'm editing that out.
He's not editing it out. He's keeping it in. Stuart. I love the Stuart because it's so fast. And if there's anything I've learned from playing War Thunder, speed is key. Mm-hmm. And I would know that because I die constantly. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to marry the Stuart. And the Valentine's an ugly bitch again. But it does have a ton of armor, so it's basically a fort. And I kind of like a big girthy bitch. Mm-hmm. So I think I'll fuck the Valentine. And then, I guess I'm going to kill the Panzer II. I hate to side with everyone on this, but honestly, I fucking hate that thing. So I think we're just gonna go ahead and we'll keep it slow, and then speed's the key. That's my 2 picks,
Speed.
and then we're gonna murder the Panzer.
Speed Racer. I really do hate to murder the Panzer II because I feel like it's a cute, humble little tank. But yeah, man, Panzer II is just getting kicked to the curb on this one.
Yeah, we're just so far beyond when the Panzer II has just become obsolete that at this point, in this theater, it doesn't really have much going for it anymore at all.
I would definitely agree. Well, that's going to end our 3 tiers for Fuck, Marry, Kill. But that's not just it, is it, Dan?
Sure, I don't know. You tell me.
We
You're
got
in charge.
we got a little special surprise for our guests. A epic showdown of the Goliaths of the African theater. It is Tiger 131 versus the Churchill Mark III. And I know Reagan's going to have some pretty strong opinions on this one. So Reagan, go ahead and start us off. Which one do you think is going to win in a nice tank showdown?
I mean, in a one-on-one, it's the Tiger. It's the Tiger of day. You've got better armor, amazingly more mobile, which is just asinine for it not being a fast vehicle to begin with. And you're also dealing with probably the most recognizable armored vehicle that's ever existed. It's iconic. I don't know how you can. If you're into tanks, you know the Churchill, but if you're just a layman, you know what a Tiger is. You know what you're getting. It's just cool. Everything about it's cool. If we're putting aside the problems, which it does have, and we know it's got plenty, it's an aesthetic tank. And for the theater, there is really nothing that's going to be killing this guy other than chance or incompetence, which ironically played a role here with our specific tank in question. But you have to give it to the Tiger overall. I think you have to marry the Tiger, but because there's only 2 options, I'm going to say you fuck the Churchill. I'm not even going to say you kill one of them.
It is a very interesting opinion. And I mean, I do have to agree with you on some of these points. The mobility of the Tiger, well, not great, is still better than the Churchill. The British and their infantry tank doctrine may not make sense to everyone, but having a tank that can go faster than 12 miles an hour every once in a while is pretty cool here. Now, the Churchill is no real slouch when it comes to armor either. It does have an incredible frontal glacis. However, it has probably the smallest frontal glacis of any tank, which kind of counterproductive. I think its 75 millimeter gun, is good for the infantry support, which is, of course, is what it's designed for. But it's all in all, I think it is in every way outmatched by Tiger 131 with its 88 millimeter gun, its thicker frontal glacis, and just overall better tank killing tank.
And let's also, real quick, if I might interject, let's also keep in mind we're talking about the Churchill Mark III here, so we're still looking at the 6-pounder, which is a 57 millimeter gun. So we are still talking about small cannon Churchill 3.
True. One could argue that the 6-pounder 57 millimeter gun, being a higher velocity, would be better at tank on tank combat than the 75 millimeter more infantry support variation. But that is a very good point to make for our viewers at home.
What is with the British and not making anything aesthetic? Do they have? Is that just a part of their genetics? Is that in their genes, where they make everything ugly?
I think the Churchill specifically looks really good. I love that it has. It kind of harkens back to the lineage of the Mark IV Landshits with its tracks that go all the way around 2 sponsons, and then the rest of the tank is kind of built in the center. That really.
I think it harkens back to the ugly man from Gloucestershire, or wherever the fuck, the silly little town in Britain, Worthinghamshire.
Gloucester.
Look at those dumb 2 front tracks that stick out in the front, just like British people's teeth. It's disgusting. I'm picking the Tiger.
That's fair. I feel I feel like if you were just to come in on this match, I feel like most people would pick the Tiger, and I can't blame you. However, like Reagan said, luck and incompetence do really play a role because in the North African theater, of course, if people don't know, Tiger 131 is the only running functional Tiger left in the world, operated by the Bovington Tank Museum. And this tank was captured in North Africa after its turret was jammed by a Mark III Churchill that knocked it out. It jammed the turret. The German crew, of course, with the jammed turret, abandoned the tank. Can't really blame them there. Uh, but there is historical precedent for this Churchill knocking out a Tiger, which I personally think pretty impressive. Pretty impressive for this underdog tank.
Yeah, but it's ugly.
That's also a matter of opinion. I think the Churchill is very handsome.
No.
I feel like you have to have a certain. It's like when you like certain drinks that other people don't. Like you have to have the acquired taste to really appreciate some of the British armor from the period. Which, if you appreciate, I think there's some redeeming qualities there. But this kind of harkens back to one of my lead points is that if you're not really, really into armor, if you're just like a casual person who's only seen tanks in like a movie here and there, the Tiger just looks cool. You have to really appreciate armor, I think, to find the cool factor in the Churchill, and I think that's what really holds it back in the broader sense.
I like how you mentioned drinks, and you'd have to there's a certain palate that has to be acquired. And in this case, I guess in order to appreciate the Churchill, you have to drink antifreeze or like kerosene mixed with honey to think it's cute. Fucking ugly little bitch. It's a disgusting little cretin.
It's actually a very large tank. So
it is a very large tank.
A large, hideous bitch.
It is a large, hideous bitch. I absolutely hate how it looks. Performance aside, I mean, it is cool that it knocked out a Tiger by, like you said, kind of sheer luck. I just, yuck. It's a yucky for me.
Interesting. Well, I think we're 2-on-1 here, which once again, I'm not surprised the Tiger 131 did win this showdown, but the Churchill won the showdown in World War II, which is the only one that matters.
What, do we know how many times Churchill got killed?
I don't. The Churchill was among the most survivable tanks of the war because, like I said, it was being that it was primarily an infantry support role. It wasn't a tank sent out to fight other tanks, and B, it does have incredibly thick armor, especially in the later variants. Actually, thicker armor by almost 50% than some of the later Tiger variants, which is pretty impressive.
I mean, I hope so. 2 miles an hour.
Yeah, once you get to the later Churchills, you end up with a much more impressive vehicle overall, and one that you probably feel a lot more comfortable if you're crewing under fire. But for this campaign, while the armor's decent, it's still vulnerable to most of the German tanks that we had on the list today.
Yeah, if you got caught on the sides, Panzer IV would have at this thing. I think the Panzer III with a 5-centimeter gun would have a pretty hard time getting through. The Panzer II, obviously, it'd be like knocking on an iron door. There wouldn't be anything a Panzer II could do except run away. Which, if I was Germany, that's what I would do. Well, that settles it. Tiger 131 beats out the Churchill in the popularity contest, but it's still the champion of my heart. I'd like to thank our special guest today, Reagan, for coming on and getting a little bit analytical with us about these tanks today.
Well, thanks for having me on. Had a good time. Always fun.
And then, of course, I'd always like to thank our beautiful man over here, Mr. Dan. Dan the man.
I don't have any good input. Don't listen to me.
Another great opinion from Dan. All right, folks, that's going to take us out. Y'all have an excellent day. Thank you, and goodbye.